Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. We are in studio today. I am in studio with John B. in the place to be. John, what's good?
Hello. The studio is the place to be.
This is the place to be. What's crack-a-lacking from the
I
West
beg to
Coast?
differ.
My man Mark
San Diego
Batson,
is
who
the
is
place to be.
with us here from, is it San Diego?
San Diego, yeah. I'm in San Diego this week.
Sunny San Diego. And Mark, give us a temperature reading on what's happening out there with the weather.
It's been cool, actually, which has been nice. Probably high 50s to high 60s, low 70s during the middle of the day, so not too hot. Nice cool breeze off the coast. The water was a balmy 62 degrees yesterday when I decided to go body surfing. So woke me up real fast. So
did you go? You went body surfing?
Oh yeah, I love. Again, once you're in, it's a shock to the system. It takes your breath away a little bit, but once you're in, it's all good.
I'd be shocking myself right back to the land. Not a chance, buddy. But hey, you are our California guy, our Pacific Coast guy. So glad to have you with us today, Mark. And your reason for being out on the West Coast?
Big family vacation. Once a year, I try to plan a family vacation to get as many of the 7 kids together and grandkids as possible. We will have 6 of the 7 here this weekend. Right now, we've got 4, 2 spouses and 2 grandkids, so total of 12 altogether.
Wow. Well, we're going to step it up. When we have a family vacation, we go to Costco together and consider it. Hey, we went to family vacation with Costco. But no, I'm glad you and your family are spending some time together. For those of you who are listening, we are recording really just a few days before the 4th of July. So this is the holiday season. And so I'm so glad that you guys will be hearing this actually on Sunday, just a couple of days before the holiday. So there's a lot of stuff that I would like to talk about, and I want to get out there. There's some things that I did not include in our show discussion that are probably going to come up because I know how I think. I'm sporadic in my thought process, but we're going to get this thing going. Let's talk about what's hot off the press. First of all, Mark, I don't know how long you've been gone.
About 9 days, I think.
Okay, you have missed all of the excitement that is happening in the Midwest. We have been attacked by the smoke that was a few weeks ago attacking New York City, Michigan, Grand Rapids, Detroit, and Chicago have been going back and forth with the most polluted air in the world.
Which is, if you've been to some of these other cities, is really hard to imagine. So
yeah,
Shanghai, Beijing, some cities like that, that's really hard to imagine.
And that's due to sheer population, I would imagine. You know, there's a million, you got a bazillion people driving cars.
No, it's more so that the lack of environmental controls on a lot of their industries were set up around those areas, frankly, and all the cars, and they don't have the same kind of restrictions on emissions, etc. So
yeah, so it has been a fog fest. I'm glad you're not here. Today is a little bit better. Wouldn't you say today's a lot better today, Jonathan?
Oh yeah, I was feeling it yesterday.
Man, you step out the house and it's like everyone kept asking. It was so funny because when I first woke up, I went and my phone opened up, and I think it was like Twitter or something like that. And then I went to Facebook, and I'm looking at the stories that are. Everyone's like, "What is it? Is someone barbecuing? Has anyone figured out what the smell is in the area?" I'm like, "If this is what your barbecue smells like, we are in trouble. We got a whole nother conversation that we have." But we have been getting hit. Is it Alberta or is it Quebec? Which province? Somewhere in Canada. I think it's Quebec and Alberta. I think both of them are on fire. All of Canada is on fire. The worst fires that they've had basically in history. But what we saw happening in New York City with all of the smoke, we aren't quite orange, but I did see Chicago. Chicago had the same kind of effect that New York was having. What did we find out?
I gave up on looking. All the headlines say the Canada wildfires.
Canada wildfires.
That's what we're calling them.
But yeah, so the air has been pretty much super unhealthy based upon, is it EPA? Who does that? the studies on that.
I'd imagine it would be the EPA.
Yeah, and so they've been telling us not to breathe, don't go outside. I'm like going, wait a minute, we just got off punishment for 2.5 years. And they're like, don't go outside. And if you go outside, put a mask on. And I felt like, oh my God, this is happening again. Have you ever seen the movie The Mist?
I've seen bits of
I don't
Stephen
think so.
King. Man, Stephen King's had, I think it was Stephen King who did a movie called The Mist. And when I came out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like that movie. Because you couldn't see probably more than a good half a mile when I first woke up in the morning ahead of you, and it's like something's in the midst. And I was telling people, you got to go watch this movie. And my mom's like, this movie's gonna freak me out. I can't watch it if it's something's coming out of the midst, because this is really freaky. But yeah, so we have been fighting with the big cities for this the worst pollution in the world, and it has been something that's really kind of crazy. Have you guys ever seen anything like this before? Mark, you have more years ahead of you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think back.
definitely haven't seen it.
When some of these cities were pretty bad, like Cleveland and Pittsburgh, but that was a little bit before my time. And when I was young, we were living in Hawaii, so we didn't really have that issue. I was just trying to think. It was again, I've been in Beijing a couple times when it was really bad. So
the thing that I saw, the measurement was like, okay, 35 parts per million or something is bad. It is the top tier of bad, and Detroit was in like the 200s or something like that.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so, people were complaining. They were saying that the hospitals have had like a 50% increase because of what's going on. And
right.
I didn't leave the house yesterday. I said, I'm going to play it safe. I got allergies and sinuses and things. I'm like, I'm not even doing this thing here. So I stayed in, but I survived yesterday. And then today the sun came out. You can actually see this. It's still cloudy outside and a bit of a haze, but not as bad as it was before. So hopefully, are they just, what are they going to do? Are they just going to just let Canada burn up, or are they what's going on up there?
I mean, I'm sure they have all sorts of firefighters from all over North America. They try to set up these lines where they start cutting trees up in front of it so that it won't jump, and they have all sorts of techniques, but it takes time.
What I was thinking was, as bad as it was here, can you imagine how bad it is in the areas where these wildfires are?
Yeah.
That's a crazy situation, and I can't imagine. And in the West Coast, Mark, where you are, they're used to this kind of thing being a little bit north of where you are.
Yeah, typically it's the San Francisco area, kind of typically.
LA,
The whole
state was on fire a couple years.
Remember a few years ago? I mean, it was tragic. Whole cities burned up, people died because of uncontained forest fires.
Well, so we're praying for Canada that they get it together, because we'd like to breathe a little bit better as well down here in these lower 50 states of the United States of America. But I also want to turn our attention to Chicago Bears are in search of a new home. And the reason this got me was because I was thinking about what, we just recently here in Michigan, we saw a transition of both our football team, the Detroit Lions, and our basketball team, the Detroit Pistons, all moved back to, and the Tigers. Everyone moved back to downtown. They're in the city of Detroit. Chicago is now looking to move its Bears to their dome in the sky, the dome of their dreams. And there are a number of cities that have been putting in their bids for this. And Mark, I saw the same thing happen just recently. I mean, when I say recently, I mean like last year, I think it was, with the Warriors moving out of Oakland, the A's, and what's their other team, the Raiders. Everyone's leaving, has left Oakland, and going back there, it was like so noticeable. A big gap in the community. All of these small stores and small businesses and restaurants, they thrive and they need these places to survive. So what do you think about the Chicago Bears being the next team that leaves the city out to the suburbs? Because it's been a flight from the city to the suburbs, and then eventually they come from the suburbs back to the city.
I mean, the reality is they're looking at it from just a straight business perspective. So whoever is going to cut them the best investment deal usually around tax breaks and things like that, is where they, because the fans will come, and so
if you build it, they will come.
Well, that's an interesting question. You've negotiated that kind of thing a lot bit more than I have. Are the bigger cities more likely to have that kind of negotiating power, or are the suburbs that don't necessarily have to deal with such a big population, are they more likely to have better deals?
I think it's just that they have to make a philosophical discussion of, that they're looking at it as, okay, maybe they're not going to get the tax revenue from the owners themselves or the stadium themselves. But to Kareem's point, all of the secondary businesses in terms of hotels, restaurants, they get tax revenue that way. And so, and sometimes those work out great. And sometimes they're absolute disasters for the state because they don't get the revenue that or the region or whatever, because states do it. Big businesses will go to different states and go like, what state's going to give me the biggest tax incentive to put my manufacturing facility or my main office here? And sometimes it works out great because of the job creation and revenue generation for that region. And sometimes it's an absolute disaster.
One of the things that I was thinking about is because there's a big fight, with the Warriors leaving. I had to picture in my mind the Warriors not being in Oakland because it was just such. I mean, since they've been an expansion team and now they've won championships, to see them not in Oakland which was originally the Oracle Arena, and then it became I can't remember what they renamed the Oracle Arena, but it was just crazy thinking of them not being in Oakland and moving to San Francisco.
Think about the Raiders. I mean, they're so iconic a brand, the Oakland
absolutely,
Raiders.
Yeah.
How many cities have they been in since then? I can't even keep track. So,
but and what's crazy is that Oakland has the most loyal fans on the planet. And so people are going to drive the Red Bridge across, they're going to go across the bridge to get there. But looking at it, I would think that one of the great attractions for a city like San Francisco would be that a number of, as you were talking about hotels, there's many more hotels in San Francisco than there ever could be in Oakland. Oakland, they were literally, the arenas were literally in the middle of the hood. You were parking at your own risk when you went to those arenas. And then also in San Francisco, well, there's been an uptick, and I wonder if there's any correlation between these arenas heading to San Francisco and the crime rate that is also increasing in San Francisco. It seems almost like concurrently, hand in hand. You got people coming from all over the place, and they don't care about your neighborhood.
I think, I'm not an expert in San Francisco, but I think their homelessness issue is an even bigger issue probably than that.
Well, they're giving away money, so they're giving checks away to everybody in San Francisco.
Hey, let's build houses for these people.
Oh, man. All right. But then I wanted to turn the conversation. We're going to get a little political here for a second because both of these stories have me cracking up laughing. Mark, I know, you're not a fan of number 45. You've been very clear about that. And I told you guys that neither am I a fan. However, there is something that is intriguingly interesting that draws me to number 45. And when I saw what was going on, I was like, this dude, so many pieces of how he operates sometimes reminds me of myself sinisterly in my mind of being able to just say and do what I want to say and do. I think everyone kind of has that idea, if I could just do what I wanted to do. Well, so recently, the secret recordings. Have you guys heard about the secret recordings?
Yep.
Okay.
Bragging about having secure documents. So
who continues? I always tell, I'm talking to friends and I'm like, I'm so glad that my private conversations are not recorded because I probably would be kicked out of a lot of places if my private conversations were recorded. This guy has been recorded talking about grabbing women, by the delete explicative when forcing them, kissing them whenever he wants to. Just all of these private conversations that are coming up. Who's recording him? And if it's him, like, why won't somebody tell him to stop?
People do tell him to stop. His lawyers have told him to stop talking. He's got zero self-discipline. He's a narcissist. He's so far he's been able to get away with everything, and even when he's quote unquote punished, he just doesn't submit to it, and nothing happens to the dude.
He's like, I did nothing wrong, and so no one.
Now he's basically saying, well, they were just fake. I was just hollowly, bragging, hollowly, So,
what are your thoughts, Jonathan?
He's actually claiming that they were from newspaper articles, and
that's the paper that we heard.
Other third-party sources. He's saying, no, I wasn't referring to these documents that may or may not have been classified. I was referring to what these newspapers said about the situation, which is, I'm not.
Only his true believers, which there's quite a few, would believe that. So, what I love these little Instagram shows where they go around to the Trump rallies, interview these people, where they basically say, well, if Trump did this, I'd be all against it, and then they say, well, he did do that, and then they. They're kind of like there's this dazed look on their face, and then they basically go, "Well, I don't care." So,
hey, watch out, Times Square. He claimed it first. He said he could kill someone in broad daylight in Times Square and get away with it. Does this seem like it's becoming more of a reality the more that we see these things that are happening with him?
That he'd kill somebody?
No, not that he would kill anyone, allegedly. No, just the fact when he was running.
For sure. Again, these people, it's almost like it is a cult of personality. He's become so anti-establishment that kind of the disenfranchised people in this country that feel like the system has run them over, and, are basically rallying behind this guy, irrespective of what he says or does.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think that the more this plays out, I think that those who are for him are going to be driven to him even more. I'll tell you what was disheartening.
They think it's all a charade. They think it was all planted. They think it's fake. It's crazy. So,
and it blows my mind that people actually think this stuff. Like we still think that that this was a stroll in the park on January 6th. 2, that the election was stolen. 3, now that, he didn't have, these private documents. But there was a very powerful, I can't remember which one it was, this evangelical pastor that came out and said basically to the effect that, we think that, he's got, there's some things here that are questionable, but, we support him. Given that we move forward, that the sum of his goodness is going to be worse than the bad things. And when I begin to think about, as a man of faith as well, like, when does the madness end? At what point do we say, okay, this is wrong, so I'm going to stand on that it's wrong, over any other issue, any other politics or anything else?
Well, this is where I've struggled all along with and I'm a religious person. I have a lot of friends that and they're supporting him despite anything he does, because he's in essence bought their vote because of his stance on primarily abortion, and religious freedoms. And do I really believe this guy is really, really against abortion? No, I don't. Do I really believe this guy even is got a hint of, Christianity or religious in him? No, I don't. He's using that because he knows it's an easy ploy to get people to vote for him.
But would we be far-fetched to say that we could credit him for getting rid of abortion?
You haven't gotten rid of abortion.
Well, I mean,
frankly, in some states, it's easier to get today than it was before.
To the degree in which Roe v. Wade, let me say it that way. Are we far from saying that we could credit him with doing away with Roe v. Wade?
He played a role in it, just like previous, Republican presidents who put conservative justices in place did. Yeah, because he was able to, during his tenure, put 3 justices in place, conservative justices. Yeah, he played a role in it for sure.
What is the church world? Can you give me a thermometer, a temperature in terms of what the church world is saying in your neck of woods, Jonathan, as it relates to Trump and his Trumpiness?
I think a lot of people buy into the rhetoric.
Just one second. First of all, I asked Jonathan that question because his dad is a pastor. He also is a man of faith. And so I'm always interested in what differing opinions are. But go ahead.
I don't know what it has to do with the church, really. I'm not sure.
I asked that question because there was this white evangelical pastor who came out in support of what. That's why I asked that question.
Like the church,
yes,
not the people in the church.
But
the church.
The church.
No, the Lutheran Church really hasn't come out on one side or the other of anything. It has its own politics to deal with, and it primarily focuses on those in terms of an organization.
All right, so
yeah, Catholics
go ahead,
never take a stance on an individual politician, the church itself, individual priests. Clearly, I've never heard them explicitly say, but what they think is very clear from their sermons or their homilies, and you'll get on both sides,
And they'll talk on issues. Like they'll say, "Hey, this is where we stand on this issue. This is where we stand on this issue." And there are going to be obviously people that align with those beliefs more than others, but I have never heard anybody in the church come out and say Trump is our next savior or Trump is the Antichrist. I haven't heard any of that.
So. In black churches, I'll say this. I grew up as a part of what is called the Churches of God in Christ, which is the largest African American Pentecostal church in the world. And I know that quote unquote the church, not its people, their stance on abortion has been pro-life for a long time. But what we have seen is some of the more like the Baptist churches and some of the non-denominational churches, and people believe in, even though we don't agree with abortion, we agree that people should have rights in principle to do what they want with their own bodies. And that's an interesting perspective because I am a pro-life individual. I'm a pro-life individual from the cradle to the grave. And so I was not necessarily upset about the right. I just think that, people are going to do what they want to do, so give them an opportunity. But I do understand how many churches would feel like, here's a president that kind of put in operation what we have been wanting to see for decades. That he put judges in that were going to side with doing away with Roe v. Wade. So I can understand that, but at some point, Roe v. Wade is not the only thing that we as people of citizens and then people of faith have to deal with. There are a lot of other things when we talk about injustice. We talk about equal protections under law. We look at what DeSantis is doing down, and he's getting ready to rid the whole state of any illegal immigrants if he can. I don't even know how to take that when we look at it, but I think that there has to be a time in which we begin to look at Trump and his Trumpiness and say that we've had enough. I want to turn the corner really quick, and we're going to talk about Joe Biden. And I know we only got about a minute or so to get going on this, so we're going to have to finish this on the other side of the commercial break. But I just want to preface and put this out there. So Joe Biden is now, he's officially going to run for president, right? And he is now tying his re-election campaign with the economy. What do they say? It's the economy, stupid. He has now come out in homage to President Reagan, whose economic plan was called, Mark, do you remember Reaganomics?
Sure.
Okay, Reaganomics, and he was a very liked president. Joe Biden is now taunting and putting out this statement about his economic plan, which he is calling Bidenomics. He's touting, which I think is absolutely funny. Mark, don't make me laugh. We're going to talk about Bidenomics. What are the key components of that plan? I just think it doesn't even sound right. Reagan economics, the comedians made it sound well. But now we're going to talk about Bidenomics. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what he is touting as a part of that plan. Is this a good idea or is this very dangerous? Stay tuned. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. I got my two guys, my side brothers in purpose here. We got John B in the place to be, who's with us. John, good? You good? You still good?
I'm good.
All right.
That was funny. The Biden economics.
We're going to get back to it. And we got Mark, who's out in San Diego doing the family thing with like 50 million people in a beach. Are you sure you're? Let me stop. I was going to say something that would have been a little bit rude, but anyways, not toward you, just toward the people group that I kind of caught myself. Thank you. But anyways, we were talking about Bidenomics. Let's get back to it. Bidenomics. Had you guys heard this, or is this something new to you guys? You hadn't heard it yet?
I've seen the title. I don't know what he's referring to as Bidenomics. I mean, because frankly, I think most people don't think the economy is doing great. I know the unemployment rate is, doing okay, but beyond that, I'm not sure what he's bragging about. So,
well, he's bragging about the fact that we've had 11 months of job list rates going down, and I guess job creation to some degree. The Build Back Better plan, which everyone in the world is still kind of waiting for to find out what that real impact looks like.
Yep.
The fact that we recovered.
In fairness, just to jump in, I do actually philosophically support at least a good chunk of that we needed to invest in infrastructure. We needed to invest in restoring some really critical supply chains back to the U.S. So philosophically, I do support that.
I'm still trying to figure out what Mark is. I think Mark is a liberal-hearted Republican, which I appreciate. I think because it's based on issues and not necessarily on a party, so I can appreciate that. But I don't know, So he's touting. This is what I will say, because I'm not a Biden fan by any means. I felt kind of like you, Mark. It was a lesser of two evils that I was voting for. And uniting the country to some degree was most important to me more than anything else. And I'm not sure even we ever did that. But what we have seen is that old guy has been able to get, a few wins in there as it relates to some of the things that he's been trying to get done. And some of those have been across party lines, which is how I want our nation to be governed. I don't want us to be forced by one party, like we saw when Trump was in office, pushing and getting no buy-in on things. But we've seen some of that on this side. But there have been some collaborative efforts, which I particularly like. Now, Bidenomics, you're too young to know this, Jonathan, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history. Back in the 80s, when President Ronald Reagan was in office, he had a plan of trickle-down economics, which you've heard of before. And so his plan became known as Reaganomics. And it was the idea that if we, cut taxes for the top tier and we put money in the wealthiest, that they would then
businesses in particular, I think. But
businesses in particular, that benefit would trickle down, which did not necessarily trickle down. I don't believe in trickle down.
Well, maybe not as far as you'd have to look at the data. But the reality is the economy when he took over, if you remember, was really, really bad. A mortgage rate was pushing 20%. So
that's and when we talk about mortgage rates, people are crying right now at 6% mortgage. And I'm saying, like, really what you have seen, these 2-3% in mortgage, that is
unsustainable.
Absolutely. And so now you're 6-7. I mean, that's kind of run of the mill for where we had been, 10-15 years before this. And so I think that's reasonable. But anyways, I want you guys to keep your eyes open because Bidenomics is coming to a town near you. Jump on the Biden train, Jonathan.
Where are they going to get the fuel to fuel the Biden train? It's like 2 months.
They're going to have solar panels on top of the train, and you don't need it at night. He's got to sleep at night. So,
well, that's my concern because
and midday,
inflation.
And late afternoon.
When we look at inflation and the cost of things, is this something that you really want to tie yourself? I mean, because things can change relatively quickly, and I think every analyst and every bank in America has been saying we're headed towards some type of a recession, except for the White House. So they must know things that we don't know. After all, he's the president. He's probably
I would kind of maybe take a different tack, which is around kind of this, remember where we were and here's where we are today, and it's a journey. Like we had broken all of our ties with our historic allies, and our best relationships were with despots and dictators, and now we're repairing that. We were a divisive country, and here's all the examples. We were repairing that, and I'd almost compare and contrast of where we were and what was wrong with it to the direction we're going. So
I mean, and I would agree with you, but I would not put my name on the economy.
No, I wouldn't either. That's why I'm surprised that
we can't control that. It's like a death sentence, possibly. What are you thinking, John? You're over there giving these crazy looks.
I don't think we have come that far, especially when it comes to foreign policy. I think that we kind of
Of course we are. We're giving billion. We just gave $3 billion again to another foreign nation.
Yeah, to another foreign nation that we were investigating for corruption 3 years ago. Oh, wait a second. That might not be a great idea, but it made our European allies happier with us than when
put America second.
Than when we had someone who said, "Yeah, let's stop giving you things." That's what made them upset. That's what broke those ties, and we didn't make friends with those despots and those dictators. We showed them, okay, we're done messing around here. Stop it. And there was some level of understanding.
Jonathan's up over here. He's upset about his 401k losing money over here.
Does he have a 401k? In the radio business, do they have 401ks?
Mark, that's a personal question. You don't ask that on purpose. No, I'm just joking.
It's more like twos.
A 201k. A 101k.
A 101k. All right. But listen, I want to get to a conversation that I think is important and to be fair in terms of how we report information. I want to talk a little bit about something that took place here. Mark, you remember when you were back in college and you used to go to the Freaknik?
I was pretty straight laced. I never went to that. I actually never had drunk alcohol in college. So
yeah, there were not very many white people that attended the Freaknik, but I want to I want to tell you guys. So as of probably, I guess the turn of this year, there has, and I'll tell you what happened. There's a documentary that's coming out that is covering a period of time which was probably from the early 90s to the mid to late 90s about an event that was called the Freaknik. And this documentary series that's coming out, I think it's coming out on Netflix if I'm not mistaken, let's talk about what Freaknik is. It covers Freaknik, and Freaknik was the response of Black college students to what most would consider spring break. So most of my white counterparts when I was at Michigan State, they were going to Daytona Beach or Hollywood, Florida, or Panama, Florida, or something of that nature. And they would go down, for the week during spring break and then, enjoy their time in the sun. Well, that wasn't typically what most Black students were doing. And so they started, just gathering in Atlanta. For many of you that are listening that don't know what Atlanta represents, Atlanta is kind of, how would I term it? Black Mecca. There's
Black
a lot
New York City.
What's that?
Black New York City, Black LA.
It's not that big, but you would, for instance, the entertainment centers, like if you're going to be an actor, you were either in New York or LA. And there was such a large population of folks that were flying in New York and flying to LA, whose home base was in Atlanta. And there's someone by the name of Jermaine Dupri who really brought that culture of entertainment in Atlanta to the forefront. And so he started producing music in LA. And soon, Atlanta. And then Atlanta became a hotspot for hip hop and urban music to be created within the city. For us, by us, we're going to create it. Why do we have to go to LA or New York to do this music? That we're the ones that are writing, we're the ones producing, we're the ones that are entertaining. Let's do it right here in our backyard. So that kind of sparked on to the whole idea of entertainment. We now know that Tyler Perry Studios, one of the top stage studios in the nation, is in the same area. So it's an entertainment mecca. Wealthy Black Americans, instead of moving to Hollywood and other places, which many of them still do, entertainment business owners, etc. Thank you so very much, Stacy, who actually used to live in Atlanta. So we see these entities now being there, and they just created a nostalgia around Atlanta. And young Black folks would go down, college students, and party like it was spring break. Well,
1982 is the first year in
yeah,
White
80.
Park in Atlanta.
There you go. And so it grew. And so by the time that I was at Michigan State, it was like the thing to do. And so I went down a couple of years, but it was, it was a little wild and a little frisky, as spring break is all over the place, right? But it ended after a period of time, as you bring those elements into a community, folks who are not a part of a school population start to infiltrate these things. So now in January, cutting back to the story, there was this nostalgia because they're doing a documentary on it. So young people who had never experienced Freaknik are now saying, we're going to have a Freaknik party here. And it has turned in, it now mirrors what the name is, Freaknik. I was looking at the video, a video on social media, and I knew that this had to be like from Alabama or Mississippi or somewhere. But no, it was right here in the city of Saginaw from a Freaknik party that they had 3 months ago or so. And, they're dancing, twerking is, right, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
Mark is like, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like to get my twerk on. No. And so this was, today's culture is a lot different in terms of music and entertainment. And hip hop is now the dominant entertainment genre of music per Billboard. And so all of our kids are like now interested. I was talking to one of the young men that you know who I'm talking about, who is new here to kind of work. He said, hey, yes, a lot of my friends were going. I was thinking about going. And I was like, you was going to Freaknik? But it's our kids now are so much more intermingled in terms of how they have fun than we were when we were kids. It was Black kids over here, white kids over here. They kind of get together and do stuff. This past weekend, there was a planned event, and the students, the individuals that were putting this together were actually from Lansing, and they put together on a Freaknik at one of the park. Mark said, "Oh yeah," at one of the parks, Unity Park here in Saginaw, and there was about 500 or more people that attended this event. I'm not sure why, but I do know that the police broke up the event. I don't know if it's too big, if there was a situation that occurred. So we have 500 people who are from all across the state of Michigan that have now descended here because it's on social media and everything is viral. The last video was like 29,000 views from the one that they did a few weeks ago. They ended up in a community event where there was a community, older people, there was some food trucks and different things that were happening in the strangest location just off downtown. 15 people ended up getting shot. I think it was 2 individual. You probably know the stats. You're a news person, Jonathan.
Yeah, 2 people were shot and killed. 15 others were injured, and that's not necessarily from gunfire. It was like people were getting hit by cars and stuff while they were trying to run away.
Yeah. So you could imagine this happening. These people kind of coming in from 2 different fashions. Some gunfire went off, which that's a whole nother conversation that I'd like to have. And one of the individuals, rest in peace, Pam Whitson, is someone that I know. She was just going to be starting a new job. She was 51. So that kind of gave me an understanding of why there were these mixed groups together. And so she was run over, I believe is how she died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was actually hit by a vehicle. But we look at this, Mark, and we look at the 4th of July coming up, and we look at the celebrations that take place around the nation. Is there a sense of fear of attending these large gatherings that are happening in our communities around the 4th of July holiday?
I think most people still take the stance of, it won't happen here. So it's not going to happen in Midland. It's not going to happen in Standish. But the reality is it seems like every year there is 1 or 2 or 3 somewhere in the country. So
I think we need to make something clear as to the situation in Saginaw as well. It wasn't one person walked in and shot a bunch of people. It was gunfire started. other people shot. Police say they recovered 5 different calibers of
Weapons.
Shells that were fired. So it's unclear. 5 different calibers were fired, but that doesn't mean they all came from the same weapons either. So there could have
Absolutely.
been dozens of weapons fired. So
yeah. And so that's the fear. And then you look at the fact that you got people from all over the place. You know, there's a crazy beef that exists in our community, from folks that, you know, you don't own or pay taxes on any of the property, and you're fighting for a particular side of town. I don't understand that. The only thing that I'm going to protect with a gun is my property. But Sharice Steele Phillips says she found out yesterday at a meeting at Bethel that they never obtained a permit for the Unity Park event per a city council member and the police. What I was told, and I spoke with some city officials this morning, is that because there were 2 events and there may be some discrepancy there, Ms. Phillips, was that they had obtained a permit for the Unity Park event, but the other event that took place, that was a community event, there was no permit. And that came from a very reputable source this morning. So there may be some confusion in terms of which one was permitted or not. The fact that there was a permit doesn't bother me as much. I think that is one of the ways that we're going to have to lock down on who gets what and how things happen. But the issue is, I think that needs to be addressed, because this was largely young people. Are we doing enough in our communities to keep these young people involved in positive recreation? Is there enough in our community that we're focusing on? Go ahead, John.
Well, here's a question too, because when I see these things talked about, and okay, we're going to develop these positive
Right.
stuff for kids to do. Do you think that there's a group of kids that have aged out of that positive? They've lost the chance to engage in any positive recreation that's coming down the line, and they're kind of left behind.
Yeah.
Well, on top of that, what time of day was this, and what kind of program is going to be at like 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning? So.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's one of the things, and I know that there had been some suggestions that if you're going to, whatever you're going to do, and this was toward the community event that took place in Forts and Tuscola, that, you know, please get it done by 10 p.m. You know, because large gatherings.
Nothing good ever happens after midnight with guns and alcohol and. Just
my grandmother used to say there ain't nothing open after midnight except legs and liquor stores. Okay. Yeah. So that is not a good factor. And so I think that they broke that one up a little bit earlier, but the community event was still going on and people kind of found themselves at that place. It was because this was not actually the Freaknik that took place. This was actually at a community event that was going on. And which of those had a permit, I think is still kind of being questioned as we see Ms. Phillips has asked us today. But you asked the question about age, being opted out age-wise. We're always going to have some knuckleheads in every group of people that we have, right? We've seen that. We call them bad actors when we talk about police officers, but there's some folk that are just straight up knuckleheads. How do we begin to address issues of bringing opportunities for fun and recreation and deal with the elements, because people are not well. We keep saying this. We are not well. And coming out of this pandemic, I was just talking with an educator. Things have been exacerbated to such a degree that it's exploited, that people can see even more now that they are not well. How do we handle having fun and being safe all at the same time, especially when we're talking about these large groups of individuals?
That's a great question. I just don't know how practical it becomes. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but when you have large open venues, I mean, anyone could come and go to this party, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And so I just don't know how, even when you have controlled venues, you can't necessarily stop a crazy person from doing stuff. And so, you know, I'm all for creating opportunities for younger people to have positive interactions, etc. But again, it comes back to like, okay, and again, I've been out of town. I don't know what time of day this was. Something tells me it was after midnight or very late.
No, it was late. Yeah, it occurred probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning that this started happening.
You're probably talking about a lot of people that are in their late teens to early to mid 20s. and it sounds like a mixture of older people, and it sounds like a lot of weapons and probably a lot of alcohol. Yeah, I don't know what you do about that. You're just asking for trouble at some point.
Go ahead, John.
I think that part of how you address, because these events are going to happen and people are going to do stupid things, but I think a big part of addressing this kind of problem is addressing the mindset. And it's one thing to give youth recreation activities and go over here and do this thing. It's another thing to tie them to the community, to give them a purpose in the community, something that they want to protect, and they're not going to want to mess up.
I can't, back to the mindset, I can't imagine pulling a gun on someone over an argument, you know?
But that happens all the time. You know, that happens all of the time. And I think, and I say, and this is one of my issues that I have, you know, I tell you guys all the time, I have, you know, firearms, shotguns, handguns, and I love them. I enjoy them. But this is where we have to really begin to figure out, because there are no gunsmiths in these communities where these young people are getting these guns. So there's some adults that are selling these guns and putting them in the hand of young people. Maybe I don't know how they're getting them, but somehow there is a part of the system has fallen apart. And so we've got to begin to address that issue. There has to be a better way for us to determine where these firearms are going. But I also think that there also has to be, to the point that you were making, John, a way for us to have fun, because young people, anybody, we need to begin to build programs with young people and not for young people, so that they have a sense of ownership in our community. And I think a lot of times, like you said, if I have ownership of it, then I don't want to see this thing go away because I enjoyed this thing. And I'm going to fight for it to stay versus being a part of its demise. And so I think that that's a change in philosophy, and even in how we incorporate programming for young people. Mark, so does this damper or change how you will celebrate the 4th of July?
No. Again, I think most people live in communities where they go like, hey, this would never happen in my community. So.
All right. What about you, Jonathan?
I don't go to big parties and things like I'm not.
I just work.
Yep. But it's more of a family thing. So no, not really.
All right. Stacey Crowd, unfortunately, is a reality. There are a lot of people out there that do this dating back. In Westerns, they pull guns on each other and other disputes. This is a serious issue. I think that this is not the end of it. And until we start targeting and how we build our communities and programming in our communities, ways to solidify the community. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, it brings another question that I've had from the very beginning. Is like, why are people in Lansing scheduling a Freaknik party in Saginaw and inviting people from all over the state? It's not like that's an easy place to get to, you know? So
that is, and that is one of the key components that I listen. One thing that we have to look at, Mark and Jonathan, is that our world has changed. The sense of community that we once had, and a fear of, I mean, we can't imagine shooting someone with a gun, is a fear that many people do no longer have. And I think video games and other expressions of violence that young people are growing up with, seeing it in their community and on front doors, are desensitizing them to the fear of what a gun can do. Guns don't kill people, people do. But when we have a prevalence of these guns, more guns than people, there has to be a real conversation about what we need to get done and how we need to do it. So I know that you guys are going to enjoy your 4th of July. Don't let the violence deter those who are doing great things. Let's go out and enjoy and change the narrative as we celebrate the independence of our nation. God bless you all. Grace and peace.